Welcome to the Now to Next podcast, where every week we provide wisdom on how to press play after a traumatic pause. If you are starting up or starting over in any area of your life or your business, subscribe and listen as we share real life stories from actual people who have pressed play and are winning after nearly losing it all. And now, your host, Octoria Robinson.
Happy Monday, my amazing friends. I know you have missed my voice. I've missed you as well. I'm so pumped to be back here with you guys and bringing the life-changing stories that help you press play. Are you ready? I surely am. I've got the complete privilege of, yes, I did exaggerate that word, of hosting a returning guest, and that of Dion Price. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course. You started diving into a place at the tail end of our interview. There was no way we would let our listeners down in that way.
Yes. Well, I'm glad to be back.
So how have you been since the last time we spoke?
I'm doing very well. I have no complaints. Things are looking good, so I'm excited. I'm excited about what's going to happen, or actually what's happening in my life, and then what's happening, what's going to happen in the future. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome sauce.
Yeah.
And for our first time listeners, you want to go back to the episode that's entitled How to Press Play After a Year of Trauma. Mm-hmm. This is the first time we interviewed Dion, and man, it was almost impossible to end, but we had to. You listening to that first part will really paint a context into how we're just diving right into the second portion of his story. It's just so, you guys get ready. It's going to be impactful. Now, where I want to take off in this interview will be where we kind of try to land at last time. You mentioned that as a very young kid, you were introduced to drugs. What age was that again?
I was at 10 years old. I started smoking marijuana and drinking for the first time in my life at 10 years old.
I know there is somebody out there listening today and saying, what on the planet Mars could have led to a 10-year-old little boy smoking marijuana and drinking? What got you to that point at 10?
Originally I thought it was just something to do. It was introduced to me by someone that was close to me, and I just thought that was a thing to do. But I realized at that age, there were a lot of things going on in my life, because in my family, that I was using those things as a coping mechanism. So I even at the age of 10 years old, I was trying to escape some of my, my life, basically. Some of the harsh things, some of the trauma that I experienced. And I used that as a coping mechanism at 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I done got a little bit more skilled since the last time I interviewed you, so I'm about to go deeper. Are you ready?
We can go deeper. I got my scuba diving equipment on, so I'm ready.
I just want to pre-warn you.
Yes.
Talk to me about those traumas that at 10, because I'm trying to think, 10 years is not a lot of living. Yeah. What could you have walked through that would have made marijuana and alcohol an option? What'd you walk through?
Yeah, well, as a young age, I grew up in a very toxic household. My father was very abusive to my mother, and some of the children, myself being one of them. There were a lot of violence, domestic violence, threats. My father abused myself and another brother of mine. And actually, Octavia, just living in fear. I was afraid of my father. But you would think that because I was afraid of my father, I would do right. But it was more of an attention seeker as well. Not just coping mechanism, but attention seeker. And so I knew my father I felt like my father did not love me at the time, and he rejected me. So those things were weighing heavy at 10 years old.
Wow.
At 10 years old.
So here again on our podcast, we really deal with the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
So I want to give that abuse an actual name. What kind of abuse did you actually experience at the hand of your father? Physical
abuse and mental abuse. Of course, we didn't know it was mental abuse back in the day, but that's what it is today. Being rejected by your father or your parents, that's abusive. That's tough to deal with. But dealing with physical abuse. And
what did that entail? The physical abuse?
Mostly just beatings. The mental abuse, to me, honestly, were worse because.
Give us an example of what you're defining as mental abuse.
I remember. One day I have three younger brothers. Myself and two younger brothers. We were going to meet our father. After he came back from work, my mom used to pack his lunch, and in the lunch pail, my mom always put one of them Hosty cakes, and so maybe that's why I like the Hosty
black
cakes
and white
today.
ones?
Maybe it was the apple pies. It was so good. But anyway, so we went there, and he looked at me and said, "I don't have." This is exactly what he said. Okay, if I can say, he said, "Listen, and I don't have nothing for you." That's what he told me. But later on, I come to find out, I went to the kitchen. My two younger brothers was eating the Hosty cake pie, and so that I still remember that today. And that was at a young age. That may have been around 9. And so here it is. I'm 50 years old. 41 years later, I can still remember that because it was traumatic to me. That was very tough to embrace. And you realize. At that time, I realized that my father really didn't love me, or I felt that way, So I stopped going to him. I stopped asking for things, but yet he would still be very mentally abusive to me. So yeah.
Now, where was your mom at in all of this?
When you're dealing with domestic violence and abuse, my mom came from a small town in Ricefield, Georgia. My father, I say he took a mind, meaning that he isolated her from everybody and everything and made her depend on him solely. And he had her afraid of him. So she was there, but, she was living in fear as well. And the entire family, 7 of us, and my mom makes 8, were pretty much living in fear.
So do you feel like as a 10-year-old little boy, you couldn't bring those things to your mom?
I felt like my mom had other things going on, and I didn't want to add to it. So I kept them inside and dealt with them the best way I knew how. And even to this day, my mom still don't know I smoke weed at 10 years old. I still won't tell her.
Well, make sure we give her a copy of this episode.
No, because I think mama still thinks she can beat me. So I'm going to leave this. She won't get this copy.
Wow. So I'm sitting here and I'm still trying to process that because I'm a girl and I don't know what it's like to be a 10-year-old little boy, but I have boys that I'm raising and I watch my babies because I have an almost 21-year-old, an almost 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. I've watched the evolution of them from my little baby boys to now I got grown men in certain cases. How do you feel like the trauma of what you saw and then the choices that you made that begin to introduce your own level of personal self-destruction and toxicity? How do you believe that affected you in maturing into a man?
Well, it gravely affected me, and I mean, it had an impact on the decisions I made.
Let's deal with first how it affected you. Give us some specific ways you can trace back to what you walked through affecting you growing healthily as a young man into a man.
It made me reject others. It made me angry, bitter. I felt hopeless. I had low to no self-esteem or self-worth. So those traumatic experiences really impacted my perception and how I view myself and the relationships that I had going forward. I didn't know how to be a good boyfriend or husband. And when I had kids, I really didn't know how to be a father because I never had an example of how to be those things. And so they impacted me in those ways. Yeah.
If I can be candid with sharing just a small piece of my journey as I ask this next question, I was on the verbal abuse side of a very abusive mom. My mom whipped us with extension cords. That was normal, though. She got whipped with extension cords, so she thought it was a way to really beat the bad out of you. But it just beat the mad into me. I felt like it just beat mad into me. And on top of the beatings, which would, like you said, eventually go away, my mom was extraordinarily vile with words. At that time, I didn't know the impact of words, and it was 3 things. My listeners have heard it before, but I'll say it again, that my mom said that I don't ever forget. She told me I was ugly. She told me I wouldn't be good for nothing but spreading my legs and having babies, and that anyone that came into contact with me would just use me. And when I tell you, I fought with everything that I had in me as a little girl to not become that. Right. And you know what I became? The very thing that I fought. I realized I had my first child at 16 and my last child at 26. And do you know when I got the emotional capacity to love those children that I birthed out of my own womb? At the age of 23.
Yeah.
It was like I first learned how to love my kids. Yeah. So I want you to, in this raw format as you possibly can, share with our listeners those challenges, because from 10, man, I can't imagine. I know my own journey, but I want to hear yours. What did you have to fight, and how did it affect your family life, man?
I had to fight rejection, abandonment, low self-esteem, low self-worth, lack of discipline, no love. And
what did that fight look like in your family?
It was difficult. There were many times I thought I was being clear, but I was being misunderstood, frustrations, aggravation. And so it just didn't, it impacted my family a lot.
So for the benefit of our listeners, I want you to think of a specific circumstance in that space of your life where you recognize, my God, the trauma of what I went through is infecting my adulthood, my family, like specifically.
I remember I was drinking, and my father he was a functional alcoholic. And I remember I was getting into an altercation with my ex-wife, and I grabbed her by the hair, and I had my fist clenched as if I was about to punch her. And I realized at that moment I was beginning to act just like my father. No matter how much I despised him or even hated what he did with my mother, to my mother, I began to see patterns in my life that I was emulating him. And at that moment, I realized that something has to change. Something has to change. And so I had to look within, and everything that I did not like, I had to pretty much, jot it down, make a list of it. And I had to deal with those individual things, such as anger, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all these things that I were doing to get away from my past or the trauma, and the things that I were doing to make me emulate my father, I had to deal with. And it was difficult because I didn't have any support. There was no male support. There was no mentor. There was no father figure, because I never knew how to establish a relationship with a man because I never had one. So this was between just really me and really God, to be honest.
What age did you have this moment?
I would say I was in my 30s. I could tell you that.
So we're talking about 3 decades later.
Of suffering in silence. Exactly.
Now, let me ask you something, because I feel for our listeners. They might be thinking, well, Dion, I'm sure there were signs along the way that you ignored, that you didn't pay attention to, because you didn't just wake up one day and get so angry that you pull the woman you loved hair and position yourself to punch her. Do you believe that there were signs that you missed and refused to deal with along your journey?
Well, going through the journey, you don't look at them. I didn't look at them as signs. I was that's just who I am. It wasn't until later I realized, that's a sign.
Give me an example of one of those things.
When I drink a whole bottle without, a whole bottle of liquor, without catching a buzz and then yearning for more. That's a sign that you have an alcohol problem. When I got to a point where people couldn't tell me anything, and I had to be right all the time, that's some pride issue. That's some anger issues. And so those were things that happened, but I pretty much pushed the blame on other people. Well, they made me do this, and I'm drinking because I want to, because I like to, and they made me get angry. And so those are the things that I use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where it reached a point where I couldn't. It wasn't no more excuses. It was on me. So I shift the blame on everybody else. Even the fact that I blame my father for having me become this person, that's shifting the blame.
Sure is.
Because I have a choice. Even at 10 years old, I had a choice. But, as I got older, I realized that I made some bad choices based on some of the trauma I did experience.
So where you just landed was impeccable, because there's a portion of every show where we like to help our listeners who are taking the time to hear your stories. Mm-hmm. They want to make this practical in their life. So you said you got there. Mm-hmm. If you had to communicate in such a way that now you know that this is going to be a tool for someone, I'm going to be able to help someone own it faster. It took you 3 decades, but they're just 2 years into the game. Not to take it lightly, but they're 2 years into this journey, and they're ready in their inside, and they're not calling it signs, but they recognize something's not quite right. And what could you say to help them own it quick?
Don't ignore the signs. Take responsibility for your actions and seek help. Find someone in your life that can see you before you see yourself. Someone that you can actually, be transparent with and trust your entire, your heart with, your feelings with, that can help show you the way. It took me 3 decades because I did not seek anybody because I didn't have a relationship or, with the man or, so it did not have to take that long. But because I did not know how to reach out and ask for help, and I was conditioned to do things on my own, it took that long. But it doesn't have to take that long. Find someone else in your life that can really speak to your potential.
Now I'm thinking about the fathers that may be listening, who have experienced or are experiencing abuse and rejection and abandonment in this way, and they've got kids or they're about to have a kid, and they're concerned with their capacity to love. I believe you have something that you can share with them to help them legitimately. When I think about, if I can be real transparent as well, when I met my last kid's father, I knew he had been abandoned by his father. He told me.
Exactly.
But I wanted to love him. I wanted to be in a relationship with him. So me as a woman, I passed the signs. And I just figured my love could fix him. And we started having kids, and I could see him not fully emotionally connecting with the kids, but I'm hoping, and I wasn't praying at that time, but I was definitely hoping that these kids and my love and all that we brought around him would make him change. But you know what ended up happening after 3 kids and 1 abortion? With my last child, he left me. He left me. And I was hurt, and it hurt my kids. But I, as a woman, I didn't pay attention to the signs. Before that man gets to the place where my kid's father got to, he tried what he could do, I guess, to remain. But when it all came down to, he didn't emotionally have what it took to remain as the family began to grow and the emotional needs grew. He just didn't have it. He felt inadequate. What would you say to that man?
I have to be honest with you. I forgave my father because I got to know my father, and I realized his father was not in his life. So he was just repeating what his father did to him. And in my father's mind, that's where he showed love. He really didn't know how to. So I tell the fathers that are out there to, we don't know everything. We all need each other. We really do. And so find somebody, a mentor, find a father figure, find your pastor, find someone that you can trust that can guide you to where you need to be for your kids' sake. For your kids' sake.
I feel like there's a man out there saying, nah, Dion, tell me how you did it. How was that first conversation with the man? What fear did you have to overcome to really open up and become vulnerable without feeling like they were going to abandon you?
I had to trust, literally, I had to trust God. And I've prayed and asked God to send me a person in my life that I feel like that he send me the right person that I can be transparent and vulnerable to. And I have to be honest with you, it was difficult. It was a difficult relationship to begin, but he was very patient because he understood my history. I was able to share my history with him because anytime you're asking for help, you have to be honest and be transparent to tell the whole story. So the guy that was in my life knew what I was going through, and he knew it was going to be a struggle. And yet today we're still working towards that.
Where did you meet him at?
Church. He was the bishop, and I met him at church. But before I trusted him, I watched him and I observed him, and I found him to be trustworthy. And we just started from there, and the relationship is good today.
So how do you feel after 3 decades of dealing with that and dealing with your own personal choices as a result of what was initiated as a young boy? Talk to us about the joy of being restored in these latter 20 years of your life. What is that? What does your new normal look like now after all you've walked through? My
new normal, I'm happy. I'm blessed. And
define
not only that,
happiness
when you wake up in the morning and everything. No, I tell you what, I'm not just happy. I have joy. That unspeakable joy. Joy happens. Joy is when it doesn't matter what happened, good things or bad things, you still have it. And that's what the scripture said, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And so just joy. And then I'm free. I'm able to share my story. And then also I feel obligated to help other people, other men especially, to get over their obstacle and over their hump. Because we men, the presence of a male figure in our children's life is valuable.
Wow. We don't want to leave our audience without the answer to, I'm sure, a question that's lingering out there. Were you ever able to restore a relationship with your father?
I was yes, I did. And unfortunately, my father passed. He passed of Alzheimer's, but I was able to restore relationships with him and forgave him for all the wrongdoing. And I tell anybody that's holding any unforgiveness, period, across the board, seek forgiveness. Ask the person to forgive you. Forgive the other person, because that if my father would have passed without me forgiving him, that's a burden I don't know if I would be able to carry. So please, by all means, understand their story. And what helped me forgive my father was I understood his story. I understood his upbringing, and I realized that he can only do what he can do. So,
how about with your mother?
My mother and I, we doing a lot better, and I guess that's on part 3. But but we're doing great. I love my mother, and I always have. But things got kind of rocky, but they coming back around.
Awesome, Dion. Now we want to help our listeners continue to connect and grow with you as you continue on your journey. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to school for again.
I'm going to school to be a clinical mental health counselor. And I believe this is a journey, this is a path that the Lord put me on, because I can really empathize with a lot of different cases and clients because of my upbringing. And so I graduate in February. My goal was to graduate with a 3.5. I got a 3.56 GPA. Yay! In spite of all those obstacles.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to finish and get in the field to help counsel people that need help. So I'm excited about that.
So what does Dion 2.0 look like? Dion
2.0 look like I'm opening up my own practice. I really want to focus not only on at-risk youth, but also men and also pastors. Pastors need counseling as well. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm eventually going to get on my social media. It's in the works. But if anyone have any questions for me, you can email me at Dione, Dione Price @yahoo.com. And I'm looking to start some speaking engagements. I want to do a men's conference here coming up real soon. I just feel like now's my time to really give back into the, to the community and back into the, to the body of Christ, especially. Yeah.
Wow. Woo. Thank you again, Dion. It is always a joy to have you here in the studio. You bring such a joy in your journey, but you're also very transparent. And I, from my soul, believe that you have helped to start a eye-opening journey of healing for many listeners today.
Yes.
Guys, we want you to know that your beginning is not your end.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Your trauma is not your destiny. There is so much more ahead of you.
Absolutely.
We're producing these episodes because we want to give you a fast forward button. Again, it took Dion 3 decades. And for me, it took me, I think, like 2 decades to get it. But you have access to this fast forward button. You got to decide today, after listening to this story, am I ready to press play? Am I ready to move forward? Do I want to continue to outlive or live out what I've already walked away and have moved on from? Or do I want to live my real purpose on this planet? I believe it's the latter. And if you're ready today, stick your finger out and even in faith, say, I'm ready to press play. I don't have to repeat what my parents did. I don't have to repeat how it made me feel. I don't have to deny the shame, the guilt, the pain. I don't have to do any of that. All I have to do is own me, own what I feel, own what I walk through, and I'll own my purpose. I believe in you guys, and I got to say it today. I love you all. I really, really do. And I hope you have an incredible week. Again, connect with Dion. He's an incredible resource, especially for men. I feel that he's really going to be able to minister to you and speak life and strength and hope into you. So definitely email him and he'll keep you up to date as his social media presence evolves. Until we connect again, my friends, have an extraordinary week.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast today. For all things Launch Now, log on to launchnowus.com for info on products, resources, and upcoming events. We are looking forward to connecting with you and enriching your life through our next episode. And remember, you have what it takes to press play. Have a super duper epic week.